Be the Talk, episode 138, featuring Farzana Jeraj. Welcome to Be the Talk. We go behind the talk 7 days a week for tips and techniques to help you change the world. I'm Nathan Eckel, and a talker myself. I'm interviewing others who change the world with their talk. You can too, even if you've never given a talk before. Let's get started with today's show. We are live with Farzana Jeraj. Farzana, are you ready to talk?
Absolutely.
With 21 years in the coaching and motivational field, Farzana is a best-selling author and teacher of applied neuroplasticity, hypnotherapy, neuro-linguistic programming, coaching, meditation, and mindfulness. The best-kept secret of pro athletes, A-list actors, and leading executives around the world. Her mission is helping you be your true self. Farzana, welcome to the talk.
Thanks for having me.
So you have kind of a unique TEDx talk that you gave. It's called Get Energized and Focused in Under 5 Minutes with Meditation. A lot of our listeners are familiar with guided meditation and some of those techniques. I've interviewed several people that practice that and have talks on meditation and maybe do a little bit, but the majority of your talk was actually applying this and guiding the audience through a guided meditation. So I'd love for you to just kind of give us a little bit of a behind the talk, and then we'll talk about your role in as a speaker, as well as really reading the audience's energy and helping to guide that in your unique function at your event.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just dive in.
Sure.
And when they invited me, they said to me, they already had 14 speakers, but the organizers were like, okay, no, we want this woman to be part of this. I was so honored by that. And they said, look, if you had 5 minutes to give people something like a takeaway, something that they would have as a tool, what would you give them? And I thought about the people who tend to go to TED conferences. And the main thing I thought is energy. People need energy to do whatever it is we have to do in our lives. And we need energy to help us be present in the moment. And so my big thing was, is meditation, because I think it's one of those things that our body and our brain were built to do. And so my aim was, how do I do something that will get people energized that anybody anywhere in the world could do in just a matter of minutes?
Yeah, and congratulations on obviously pulling that off. I know that you do that very frequently. You can see Talk Universe, when you watch this talk, you see how Farzana instantly connected to the audience, really just kind of where the audience was at that stage in the day. And you see how they respond to her and how she's able to lead and guide and really give them, not just talk about the practical tips of meditation, but actually lead them through. So, can you take us kind of behind the mechanics? That's kind of a silly word maybe, but you had to read the audience. You had to almost be like an MC, in terms of being able to gauge the level of the audience and then pivot and adjust the way that you, responded to them and met them in that moment. Can you take us just behind that moment of stepping out on stage, being in the spotlight, having all of those kind of physiology of stepping on stage and being on, and then having to immediately have that unique dynamic of reading the audience somehow and meeting them where they are? Did that make sense?
Absolutely. It does. So I knew that I was going to be I was the second to last person. And I knew that after 13 talks during the day, people are brain tired.
Yes.
And I knew this well ahead going in. So I had a personal goal of mentally energizing everybody in that audience. And I knew they would be tired. I knew they'd be inspired. I knew they would have gone through all kinds of emotional ups and downs through the day. And there is a level of just being emotionally, mentally, and even physically tired. And so TED has a mandate to get people moving in between talks. And so they had an aspect of wanting me to get people physically moving, But what I know from conducting seminars and doing retreats and having people, doing 13, 14-hour days in seminar is that when you're physically tired and mentally tired, that getting up and just moving your body is not enough, because you get your blood moving for a second, you sit down and
it goes right back
you
down.
go back into the coma.
It goes right back down.
Right back down. And so I was like, mental energy is so important, right? We have these moments where we will, how when you're going to meet a friend for lunch in the middle of a busy day and you've got all these to-dos happening. Well, so often we spend our morning thinking about how we can't wait to be at our lunch. And then when we're at our lunch, we're spending it thinking about all of the other things we have to do or the things that we didn't get done before. And we don't have that presence with our friends while we're having that lunch. And when we go through the rest of our day, we spend that time wishing we had been more present and wishing we had enjoyed that. And so my desire is to help people, instead of having your mental energy left all over the place, right? Like, cause I know for a certain, I have some energy on a little pile of books that stays by my bed, my guilt pile of books that I've been meaning to read.
Energy.
And I have energy on chores and laundry and all the things that I have to remember. And that energy, when it's split in my mind, it's not inside myself where I can use it. And so part of this was meant to help people draw their energy back in a way that would be tied to the physical, because they had a physical mandate from TED. And I personally, from my experience, wanted people to get them mentally energized. But I think as a master of ceremonies or as an MC, when you go out, or even as a keynote speaker, when you have your talk, no matter what you're talking about, whether you're managing an audience or whether you're delivering your message, you must go out there and feel the room. I basically think about it as expanding my consciousness to contain the entire room. And you can sense if they're tired or if they're emotional or sad, just as you would another person that you're talking to. And my job is to go in there and meet them sort of just above where they're at and help draw them up to where I am. It's kind of like being a teacher in the sense that you have to treat every person as though they do not understand what you're talking about and help guide them and lead them to where you want them to go and bring them with you. It's like, hey, let's go here together. And I think that is one of the most effective things of being a speaker, whether you have a set talk or not. Sometimes speakers with their set talks, they go out into the audience and unfortunately they don't connect and the talk falls flat. Or even comedians that have a set routine, if they can't ad lib, if they can't connect to that audience and that demographic, you have to be able to know your audience and sense and adjust and shift with that no matter what. And I think that is a trainable thing, but it is partially also using your intuition and basing your skills on what you're intuitively picking up. But I do believe you can train that and learn how to read an audience.
I love
and
that
learn certain things to engage them.
Farzana, I love that you're talking about kind of the what happens when things don't work, what happens when you're not filling the room with your energy. And I know some people listening to this might be a new idea. It might sound a little bit out there, but I'm telling you, all you need to remember is the last time you were in a school board meeting or you were in church or you were in some kind of a keynote and the person just didn't connect. And it wasn't because they weren't prepared. It wasn't because they weren't intelligent, but something about that. Why did they not connect? Why were you bored? Why were you not riveted? Why was it not a match for you? It's because of these techniques. It's energy, it's metaphysical, and it's real. It's real on the scientific level. So whichever philosophy you subscribe to or don't subscribe to, find something that's going to get the job done for you. And I think the way that Farzana is describing this is something that has been new to me, maybe about 10 years ago, but now it's not new to me. And I know it's a real thing because I've studied the craft of speaking and taking courses and have mentors that talk about stuff like this. And all you need to do is remember the last time you were sitting somewhere looking at your watch or your cell phone trying to find a socially acceptable way to get the heck out of that room, that's because the person did not connect. And so it's a little bit of an example, but it's the same one that you're using. Comedians, they don't connect. It's not because they're not prepared. So I thought that was brilliant, filling the room and then kind of reaching down and just being a step above where the audience is and pulling them up a notch, I think is a great way of describing that, even if that's a little outside the box sounding.
Yeah. And even, but the truth is we've all had a sense that someone cares for us, like in sales interactions. Mm-hmm. You can tell when the salesperson is just trying to give their spiel, or they're in there with their butts, and, you know, but this, but that, and they just want to make a sale. Whereas you can tell that there's a person who genuinely cares about you. And I almost consider it as we've all had interactions where we could tell the person cared about us. And the way I see it is I imagine myself, like I'm a big hugger. I believe that hugs are their own food group. And I actually imagine that every single person in the room is within my hug.
Oh, I like that.
That room is filled
that's
with
really
my
what
hug.
You just said, only you've used an even easier metaphor for all of us to kind of literally get our arms around it. Pun intended.
Yeah. And so I think that's the most important thing, is when your audience knows that you care about what matters to them. It doesn't matter if you're telling your story. You're telling your story because something in that matters to them. Like, I think the greatest key to my success is that it is not about me, other than the fact that I am leading by example. And only by my example can I demonstrate in every capacity that what I'm doing, right? By demonstrating, by living it, by being it. Then only can my words and that I use to instruct or share knowledge truly have weight.
Oh, for sure. And we've been enjoying a conversation with Farzana Jeraj. Her talk is called Get Energized and Focused in Under 5 Minutes with Meditation. We're going to be right back with Farzana in the Blitz Round. People ask, how could I start a 7-day-a-week podcast? It's because of what I've learned from my mentors. Some of the best mentors in history aren't around anymore. They've left hours of one-on-one mentoring behind in their books. Each month at Classics on Tap, I record a new chapter from a classic business book to help you make a difference. Download your first chapter at classicsontap.com. And we're back with Farzana Jeraj. It is time for the Blitz Round, where I ask you a few questions, either or type questions. Actually, I'm going to change the format of the Blitz Round just because of the special nature of her highly applicational talk. Farzana, are you ready?
Mm-hmm. So
I'm instead of the either or, I'm going to ask you kind of some of the more substantive questions. What is would you say is the biggest challenge of your talk? I know we've been talking about that this entire time, but what would you say in your words?
I would say the biggest challenge of doing the talk was cramming everything I wanted to get into that 5 minutes in line with what TED wanted. They had actually a team of like over a dozen coaches for it. And all the coaches come from different backgrounds. Some of them are Toastmasters, which is a formula, like a different formula for
totally
talking, which is not necessarily my own. And some of them come from the acting world. And so there's such a variety of coaches. And I would say one of the most challenging things was that some of the coaches hated the idea of my talk, were actually vehemently opposed to it. And the coaching process was one of the most challenging things I've been through, because as someone who's considered an expert in my field, to go into a room where there are people in there saying that I think this is a waste of time was extraordinarily challenging. But even then, wanting sometimes they want to see a script and they want to see things like that. Whereas my methodology is, I know what I want people to feel, experience, and take away. And I have language around that. But part of feeling your audience and knowing your audience and reading your audience and being with them means knowing your stuff so well that you can adapt your language to suit that audience.
So how did you do that? How did you adapt your language to suit these, not completely suit the other coaches, but how did you stay true to what you do while being able to change the language to make it maybe a little bit more acceptable, at least in that brief amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. So they really wanted physical movement at the beginning and the end, because they believed that physical movement is what was going to get the audience revved up. And we've already talked about that.
I'm thinking,
I don't really see.
Yeah, the mental and the emotional needs to be connected also. So how did you tie it together enough for them to feel like they were being understood and then yet stay true to what you knew would work?
So it really was a working together, and over the months, and it was many months, like every few weeks we would go in and I would have to rewrite and redo this. And each time I would get more feedback, sometimes very different. And literally we were tweaking it until the night before the talk. And ultimately in the very end, what I will say is, to be a speaker and truly speak in integrity, you must speak what you believe. And so I found a little place where I could be completely in integrity with what I believed and what they wanted. And I basically started it out with a moment of mindfulness, of like just getting still, going within yourself, and then starting to incorporate a little bit of physicality. And I thought about all the people who are walking. Imagine if you could walk now mindfully, if each step that you took was something where you could draw energy in from the earth as you step, instead of thinking of walking as something that expends energy. If you could use your hands to draw energy into yourself, so that you're not just doing something in your mind, you're also physically tying it in. And so I found a way to do that. And then in the middle of it, just take that stillness and enjoy it. And kind of like the philosophy of yoga, originally there were only 12 poses of yoga in the original practices. And those 12 poses were practiced so that people could sit in a meditative state. And so I thought about, okay, well, maybe we're just moving our body and gathering our energy so that our energy is within ourselves, so that we can use it to be truly present and just enjoy that state. And so it was really about finding that meaning. And when I found it, I kind of like, everybody was like, it was like instant alignment, and everybody was like, okay, this is great. And the best part is there were a couple of people who weren't sure about it. And in the end, when they experienced the talk live, they actually were like, oh my God, that was amazing. I didn't actually even believe it was possible, but it was.
We've been enjoying this conversation in the Blitz round, actually, with Farzana Jeraj. Her talk is called Get Energized and Focused in Under 5 Minutes with Meditation. Organizers, if you're listening to this, people on local teams, this is I'm just going to tell you, this is a great talk to have towards the end, where you have to play your own TEDx videos as part of your future event. This is a great one, just like she was placed actually second from last. This would be a great video for you to show to fulfill some of these TED requirements for your event. Just wanted to say that, and also wanted to let you know where you can connect with Farzana. You can go to farzanajj.com, farzanajj.com, and go to our show notes page, and we'll have a link there at BeTheTalk.com, as well as a link to that talk. And in a moment, we'll be back with the 15-second, I'll call it, 15-second word of advice with Farzana. Everyone wants to change the world, but not everyone knows the first step. Before you can change the world with your talk, it has to be selected. So grab the templates, timelines, and tools that I use to get my talk selected at BeTheTalk.com. And we're back with the final word of advice with Farzana Jeraj.
Okay, so my 15-second word of advice is, when you go speak, the most important thing, if you only did one thing, is know what you want them to feel and the one thing that you want them to go home with. Nothing else matters. What do you want them to go home thinking about? And more importantly, what do you want them to leave feeling?
Farzana Jeraj, thank you so much for coming on the talk today and sharing your wisdom and your experience with Talk Universe.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Be The Talk. For tips and resources to help you change the world, go to BeTheTalk.com. See you tomorrow.